Hi, I've had a really great question in from somebody who's actually inquiring about my mentoring program. But bear with me because it's a property related question. And the gist of the question is this. Hey Peter, I'm thinking about being mentored, but I don't consider myself to be mortgageable at the moment. So is there any point in taking this further forward? Is there any point in having a mentor? Not the exact words he used, but that's the gist of what he was asking. Well, the very first thing I'd say is just because you assume that you're not mortgageable doesn't necessarily mean that you are unmortgageable. And the best way to check is for me to put you in touch with a mortgage broker, my very good mortgage broker, which I'm very happy to do, and I will do that. But let's just sort of grab this question and assume that he is actually unmortgageable. Well, the first thing is he hasn't said whether he's got any savings, which may make a difference to the answer. But as he hasn't said he's got savings, I'm going to assume that he hasn't. So I'm assuming that this is basically somebody saying to me, I've got no money. Is it even worth thinking about doing property investing? Or in other words, as I'm unmortgageable, can I be a property investor? Well, I think without getting into semantics, part of the answer depends on how you define property investor. Do you mean literally a property owner? Because there are cheaper, low money, low cost entry level strategies which don't require you to be an owner in property, but you can benefit from the property as if you were the owner. And I'll tell you what those are in a moment. I think the important thing to remember is this. In property, the general rule is it's either time or it's money. It's time v money. So if you're short of time, then you will probably need more money in order to achieve whatever it is you want to achieve. So for example, we hear stories of people who are relatively wealthy or very wealthy and they just don't have time to go out and do property investing. And so maybe they'll have to pay somebody to do the property investing for them. For example, paying a deal packager or a property sourcer to find their properties for them. They won't have time to manage the properties, and so they'll pay a managing agent to look after the properties for them, and so on and so on. And of course, if we flip that around the other way, if you're short of money, which this particular viewer of my YouTube channel is, then you will need more time. So there are things that you can do if you don't have much money, but you will need more time in order to implement them. So if we go back to the sort of low cost, not much money required entry-level type strategies, you can see that this is exactly how it plays out. So one of the first strategies which I would probably discuss with this particular person is whether they'd want to do something like rent to rent, where you would essentially rent a property off a landlord and then sublet it out. And by the way, if it's done the right way, that's not illegal or immoral. I think a lot of people get very confused around the whole concept of subletting and of subletting being a bad thing. It's only a bad thing in the context of the stories you hear, like in London, where people have been subletting their council houses and using them as Airbnbs when they're meant to be homes provided by the council. Subletting in itself is not a bad thing. It just depends on how you do it. So rent to rent is a viable strategy which somebody could consider if they don't have money, but it takes time because you've got to go and search for the deals. You've got to go and search for people who would be motivated enough to want to do a rent to rent with you, and that all takes time. You've got to think about the marketing, and if you haven't got very much money, then the marketing is going to rely upon you doing a lot of the donkey work and getting in front of the leads and the people who've got the deals that you're looking for. Another similar strategy could be the use of options or delayed completions or assisted sales. Now, if you're not sure what they are, I haven't got time to go into that now because this is a relatively short video and we could spend days talking about different ways of doing options and delayed completions and assisted sales. What we could call the no money down techniques and strategies in property. And by the way, again, going off at a tangent, sometimes you'll hear people say things like, oh, well, no money down, it doesn't work, or no money down, it's illegal. And neither of those are true. There are ways of doing it which is illegal, of course, just as there's ways of doing most things in life which you shouldn't do it that way. But if you do it the right way, if you do it the correct way, then it's perfectly legal and perfectly ethical, but you need to know what you're doing. But can you do no money down deals? Can you do option agreements? Can you do delayed completions? Can you do assisted sales? And can you effectively get control of the property and effectively have the same rights to the property as an owner, but without owning it? Well, yes, you can, but again, it takes time because you've got to be able to find the deals. You've got to find people who are motivated to do a deal like that with you, and they'll have very specific circumstances. Otherwise, they're not going to consider doing that kind of deal with you. It all takes time. What else could you do? Well, if you're literally starting with no money, you could do some deal sourcing or some deal packaging. So you might not be able to actually buy the deals, you might not be able to actually buy the properties. But if you've built your network of contacts and you know of people who are looking for properties, you know exactly what type of property they're looking for, more specifically what strategy they want to be involved in, and you find a property which would work for that strategy, then of course you could package the deal up and sell the deal onto them for a fee without having to own the property. You would be like an intermediary. Technically you would be an estate agent, and if you want to do that kind of thing, if you want to do deal sourcing or deal packaging, you'd have to do a number of things to make sure that you're compliant legally, which are not hard by the way, and nor are they expensive, but you'd have to do them because in the eyes of the law you would be akin to being an estate agent. But you could do that, you could go out and find the deals and then you could package them up and sell them on to somebody else and take a fee for doing that. Or you could find the deals and you could find somebody with the money and you could do something as a JV. So they are things you can do if you're starting without any money or very much money. And of course, if you are mortgageable, that would give you a whole raft of other strategies which you could consider, like doing a JV where somebody perhaps just lends you the money to buy a property, and then you could then do a refurb and add value and then refinance it and pay them back from the refinance. But of course that all hinges on being mortgageable. In this particular instance, the viewer was asking what would they do if they're not mortgageable, so unfortunately that wouldn't apply. But the bottom line is this: regardless of your financial situation, there are things that you can do, but the general rule is, again in summary, if you don't have the money, then you need more time to compensate. So I hope you find that helpful. The bottom line is, if you've got the energy and the time to put into your property business, then yes, of course there are things you can do, even if you don't have the money. I hope you found this video useful and informative, and if you did, then please come over to my website www.thepropertyteacher.co.uk, where you'll find loads more great property related resources, including free special reports to download and my best-selling series of ebooks, which includes the Successful Property Renovators Workshop, 63 common defects in investment property and how to spot them. And if you're just starting out in property, or if you want to grow your portfolio, you may be particularly interested in the Successful Property Investors Strategy Workshop, in which I'll take you through exactly how I started and built my property portfolio, starting literally with none of my own money, and how I built a portfolio of £2 million worth of property in just 4 years. And that was starting from scratch. I'll take you through everything that I did right so that you can copy me and do the same. And I'll also show you everything that I did wrong so that you can avoid the mistakes that I made, and so that you can progress in property and be far more successful far more quickly than I ever was. And this is based upon my own real life experience, and it took me about 4 years to actually work out how to do property investing properly. But in the 200 pages in the Successful Property Investors Strategy Workshop, I'm going to show you all of that 4 years knowledge condensed down so that you can use it immediately. And until next time, here's to successful property investing.